What happens when the man you trusted to build a new life with leaves you to die in a blizzard? In the frozen mountains of Blue Ridge, North Carolina, December 1888, a storm could be a death sentence. But sometimes, it could also be a beginning. Picture a cabin, barely visible through sheets of white. A single point of light against an endless winter darkness. Inside, a man sits alone, unaware that in moments, everything will change. Outside, death crawls closer on frozen hands and knees. The wind screamed like something dying. It tore through the valley with teeth of ice, stripping bark from trees, turning breath into crystals. The temperature had plunged to 15 degrees below zero, and still it kept falling. This was the kind of cold that killed quietly, stealing warmth first, then feeling, then thought, then life itself. Rose Whitmore had stopped feeling her feet an hour ago, maybe two. Time had become meaningless, measured only in the space between one labored breath and the next. She crawled now, unable to stand, her traveling dress frozen stiff as armor, weighing her down. The blue wool that had seemed so practical in Philadelphia was now a cage of ice. Her fingers, white as bone, still clutched a letter. Even through the delirium, through the creeping fog in her mind, she held on to it. Evidence. Proof. The last testament of a woman about to become a ghost. Through the white curtain of snow she saw it. A light. Impossible, surely. A trick of her dying brain. But no, there it was again. Warm, steady, real. Rose forced herself forward. 10 feet. 5. Her vision tunneled, darkness creeping in from the edges. The light grew larger. A cabin. Rough-hewn logs. A door. She raised her hand. Knocked. The sound was pathetic, barely audible over the wind's howl. Knocked again. Nothing. Rose's hand fell. She slumped against the threshold, cheek pressed to wood worn smooth by mountain weather. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That was good, wasn't it? That meant she could rest. Her eyes closed. Inside the cabin, Caleb Mackenzie looked up from the deer hide he was working. His hands, scarred and strong, paused mid-motion. Those sounds. 3 weak raps against his door. In a storm like this, nothing with good sense ventured out. Not bear, not wolf, not man. Caleb stood, his full height impressive even in the low-ceilinged cabin. 6'2" of mountain-hardened muscle, his frame built from years of splitting logs and hauling game. His beard, thick and dark brown, streaked with early gray, covered the lower half of a weathered face. Hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with leather cord. He looked like something from an earlier age, carved from the mountain itself. He grabbed the Winchester rifle propped against the stone fireplace. The cabin was simple but well made. A single room with a sleeping loft above. Animal hides on the walls for insulation. Books, surprisingly, lined a crude shelf. A man could be alone without being ignorant. His mother's Bible sat beside almanacs and a worn copy of Shakespeare. The knocking came again. Weaker this time. Caleb moved to the door, rifle ready. He'd made enemies. A man who lived alone in these mountains usually had a reason for the solitude. He lifted the heavy wooden bar and pulled the door open. The blast of cold hit him like a fist. Snow swirled into the cabin, bringing the smell of ice and pine and something else. Wool, wet fabric, blood. At his feet, collapsed across the threshold, lay a woman. Caleb's first thought, oddly, was that she looked like a painting he'd once seen in a church. A dark-haired angel fallen from grace, porcelain skin gone translucent with cold. Her lips were blue. Ice crystals clung to strands of hair that had escaped from pins. In one frozen hand she clutched a small carpet bag, in the other, a letter. He didn't think, didn't question. Caleb dropped the rifle and pulled her inside, kicking the door shut against the storm's fury. She weighed almost nothing, like carrying a bundle of frost-covered sticks. He laid her before the fire, its warmth suddenly seeming inadequate against the cold radiating from her body. Her skin felt like river stones in winter. Caleb had seen hypothermia before, had watched it kill. He had minutes, not hours. He grabbed every blanket he owned, heavy wool and thick bearskin, and began wrapping her. But the dress. That sodden, frozen dress would kill her as surely as leaving her outside. Caleb's hands hesitated. Then he remembered his sister, dead 15 years now from fever. She'd have forgiven the impropriety to save a life. He worked quickly, eyes averted as much as possible, replacing the frozen blue wool with dry flannel. One of his own shirts massive on her frame. Then the blankets, layer upon layer, creating a cocoon near the fire. He added wood to the flames, coaxing them higher, put water on to heat, grabbed dried herbs from the shelf above his makeshift kitchen, yarrow for fever, willow bark for pain, mountain tea for warmth. The woman's eyes fluttered open. Green, he noticed, the color of new spring grass, startling against her pale face. They fixed on him, widening with fear. She tried to move, to scramble back. Caleb held up his hands, staying low, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough from disuse. He lived alone for weeks at a time. Speech felt strange on his tongue. "You're safe. Drink this." He offered a cup of the hot tea, steam rising in the cold air. She stared at him, taking in the beard, the wild hair, the sheer size of him. He must look like something from a nightmare, a mountain man, a beast. But her hands, shaking violently, reached for the cup, survival instinct overriding fear. Caleb helped guide it to her lips. She drank, gasping at the heat, then drinking more. Color began to seep back into her cheeks, a faint pink bloom against white. "Storm's bad tonight," Caleb said, settling back on his heels, giving her space. "You're lucky I heard you." The woman nodded, teeth chattering too hard for speech. She pulled the blankets tighter, and Caleb saw her notice for the first time that she was wearing his shirt, that her dress lay in a frozen heap by the door. Her eyes darted to him, questioning, afraid. "Had to," Caleb said simply. "Wet clothes in this cold, you'd be dead by morning. I was respectful." She studied his face, seemed to find something there that eased her fear, and nodded again. They sat in silence, the only sounds the crack and pop of the fire, the howl of wind outside. Caleb busied himself with practical matters, hung her dress to dry, heated up the stew that had been simmering on the stove, filling 2 bowls, offered one to her. She took it with both hands, still shaking, and began to eat. Slowly at first, then with increasing hunger. Caleb pretended not to notice how she attacked the food, the desperate edge to it. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She swallowed, found her voice. It came out hoarse, accented with the precise tones of Eastern education. "Yesterday morning, I think." Caleb nodded, refilled her bowl without comment. They ate together, this strange tableau of mountain man and city woman, survivors of a winter storm. When she'd finished, color had returned fully to her face. The violent shaking had subsided to occasional tremors. She was alive. She would stay that way. Caleb stood, retrieved a pair of thick socks, knelt before her. "Your feet, may I?" She extended her legs from beneath the blankets, and Caleb examined her feet with the practiced eye of someone who'd treated frostbite before. Bad, but not catastrophic. He warmed them gently in his large hands, then slipped the socks on. "You'll keep your toes," he said, "but they'll hurt like hell for a few days." A small, surprised laugh escaped her. "Thank you." "You got a name?" Caleb asked, settling back into his chair, maintaining distance. "Rose," she said. "Rose Whitmore, from Philadelphia." "Caleb Mackenzie. Folks call me Bear." He paused. "That's a long way from Philadelphia, Miss Whitmore." Her face clouded. Caleb saw her hand move to the letter she'd been clutching, now drying by the fire beside her dress. "I was supposed to marry a man. Marcus The name hit him like a physical blow, stealing breath, flooding him with memories 5 years buried. Fire, screaming. His father's face, blood-streaked, lips forming words Caleb would hear in nightmares forever. "Promise me. Get justice. Promise me." "What did you say?" Caleb's voice had gone flat, dangerous. Rose noticed the change, shrank back slightly. "Marcus Thornfield. He's a rancher, wealthy. He sent for me to be his wife." Caleb stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at the white darkness. His hands, he noticed distantly, had curled into fists. "You know who that man is?" he asked without turning. "A successful businessman. That's what his letters said." "He's a murderer." Caleb turned, and Rose flinched at what she saw in his face. 5 years ago, his coal mine collapsed. 17 men died in the dark, buried alive or suffocated, crushed, screaming for help that never came. Rose's hand went to her mouth. "I was foreman of that mine," Caleb continued, his voice hollow with old grief. "My father worked there. Thomas Mackenzie, third-generation coal miner. My little brother, too, Samuel. He was 19, wanted to be a teacher, but the mine paid better." Caleb moved back to his chair, sank into it, suddenly exhausted. "I saw the cracks forming in the support beams. Told Thornfield we needed to shut down, do repairs. He said no. Said it would cost too much, take too much time. Said I was being overcautious. When I pushed harder, he fired me." 2 weeks later, the mine collapsed. The silence that followed was heavy as snow, as the 17 bodies they'd pulled from the rubble. "I got there as the dust was still settling," Caleb said quietly. "Went down anyway. Found my pa and Samuel in the deepest shaft. Pa was still alive. Barely. His back was broken, crushed by a beam. He couldn't feel anything below his chest, but his mind was clear." Caleb's voice broke. He cleared his throat roughly. He looked at me, and he said, "Promise me, boy. Promise me you'll get justice. Don't let Thornfield get away with this." Those were his last words. "Promise me." Rose had tears on her cheeks. "I'm so sorry." Thornfield paid off the investigators, paid off the sheriff, the judge, everyone who mattered, got away clean. Not even a fine. Just sealed up the mine and moved on to other ventures. Built himself a mansion on the hill. Started planning a political career. Understanding dawned in Rose's green eyes. He needs a wife. For appearances. A respectable family man. That'd be my guess. Caleb looked at her properly now, seeing past the hypothermia victim to the intelligent woman beneath. "What happened? Why were you out in the storm?" Rose pulled the letter from where it lay drying, unfolded it carefully. "He met me at the station in town this morning. Stone Creek. Looked at me like I was livestock at auction. Said I wasn't what he expected. Too thin. Too weak. Too Eastern." Her voice remained steady, but Caleb heard the hurt beneath. "He said he'd made a mistake, that I was unsuitable for ranch life. He gave me this letter." She handed it to Caleb. He read, anger building with each word. The letter was brief, coldly formal. "Marcus Thornfield hereby dissolves any understanding with Miss Rose Whitmore, citing misrepresentation and unsuitability. Enclosed is $10 for return passage." $10, Rose said with a bitter laugh. "As if that would get me back to Philadelphia. As if I had anything to return to." "He didn't take you back to town," Caleb said. It wasn't a question. "No. He had his driver take me to a fork in the road, said the town was that direction, pointed vaguely west. Then he left. It wasn't snowing hard yet, just starting. I thought I could make it." "The fork," Caleb said slowly, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "That's 8 miles from town, in the opposite direction." Rose's eyes widened. "What?" "He gave you wrong directions, sent you up into the high country in a blizzard." Caleb stood again, paced, fury making him restless. He was counting on the mountain to kill you. But why? Why not just send me back? Because you'd talk. You'd met him. Seen his character. Maybe noticed things. A woman scorned, they'd say. Bad for a man running for office. Caleb's voice was grim. Easier to have you disappear. A tragedy. Poor mail-order bride, lost in a blizzard. No one to blame. Rose pulled the blankets tighter, though the cabin was warm. I have the letter. His handwriting. It's evidence he rejected me. Smart. Caleb felt a flicker of respect. You kept it on purpose. My father was a ship captain. He taught me to always read the contract, always keep the paperwork. Her voice softened with grief. Both my parents are gone now. Father's ship went down 2 years ago. Mother died of pneumonia shortly after. The shock, they said. Broken heart, I think. They sat in companionable silence, two people touched by loss, finding unexpected understanding in a mountain cabin while a storm raged outside. I tried to find work after they died, Rose continued, but respectable positions for women are scarce. My landlady showed me Mr. Thornfield's advertisement, said mail-order brides could make good lives out west. She laughed softly. I wasn't looking for love, Mr. Mackenzie. I'm 26 years old. I just wanted somewhere to belong. And instead you nearly froze to death. Instead I found you. Rose met his eyes. You saved my life. Twice now, I suppose. Once from the cold, once from my own fear when I woke and tried to run. Caleb felt his ears grow warm. Compliments sat awkwardly on him. Just being neighborly. A sound from outside cut through their conversation. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses moving slowly through deep snow. Voices calling out. Caleb moved instantly, pulling Rose down below the window line. He pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded, understanding, fear blooming fresh in her eyes. Through the gap in the shutters, Caleb watched 3 riders approach, torches held high against the darkness. He recognized the lead rider even through the snow. Clayton Reeves, Thornfield's head of security, former marshal, dismissed for excessive force, now Marcus's enforcer and right hand. Check the area, Clayton's voice carried over the wind. Mr. Thornfield wants to make sure the girl didn't survive. The other men fanned out, searching. One rode close to the cabin, close enough that Caleb could see his face in the torchlight. Young, mean, the kind that enjoyed hurting things. Caleb felt Rose trembling beside him, though whether from cold or fear he couldn't tell. He put a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. The riders circled for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, Clayton called them back. Too much snow. If she's out here, she's dead. Let's get back before we freeze too. They rode off, torchlight fading into white darkness. Caleb waited until the sound of hooves disappeared completely before speaking. They'll be back. Maybe not tonight, but soon. Thornfield wants to be sure. Rose's voice was small but steady. What do we do? Caleb looked at her, really looked. Saw not a victim, but a survivor. A woman who'd walked through death and kept going, who'd kept evidence, who'd stayed calm while killers searched outside. She had steel in her, this Rose Whitmore. There's a root cellar, he said. Under the cabin. Can you walk? Rose stood, testing her feet, wincing. Yes. Caleb moved a rag rug aside, revealing a trap door. If they come back, you go down there. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. There's a tunnel. Leads to a cave about 50 yards north, in case of fire or bear attack. You can get out that way if you need to. He looked at her seriously. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Rose met his eyes. In them she saw no threat, no danger, only a deep weariness, and beneath that, a fierce determination. This was a man who'd lost everything, who'd spent 5 years trying and failing to get justice, who lived alone because the world had broken his faith in it. But he'd opened his door anyway, saved a stranger, offered warmth and shelter and protection, asking nothing in return. Yes, Rose said, I trust you." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. The hardness softened, just slightly. "Good. Because tomorrow we figure out how to keep you alive. And maybe, if we're smart about it, we get justice for 17 good men." He helped her back to her spot by the fire, piled the blankets around her again. "You take the bed tonight. I'll sleep down here." "I couldn't," Rose protested. "You can, and you will." His voice allowed no argument. "You nearly died. You need proper rest." As Rose climbed the ladder to the loft, she paused, looked back. "Mr. Mackenzie? Bear? Thank you. I won't forget your kindness." "Couldn't just leave you out there," he said, and this time there was the ghost of a smile beneath the beard. Later, as the storm continued its assault and Rose's breathing evened into sleep above, Caleb sat by the fire and thought about promises. The one he'd made to his father, the one he'd just implicitly made to Rose. They were connected now, their fates braided together by circumstance and a blizzard and a man who thought he could play God with other people's lives. Marcus Thornfield had made a fatal error. He'd left Rose alive, and in doing so he'd given Caleb something he'd lacked for 5 years. A witness, a victim with proof, a reason to fight that went beyond personal grief. The fire crackled. Outside the wind howled, and in a mansion 8 miles away, Marcus Thornfield slept soundly, confident that his problem had been solved by winter and distance. He was wrong. The storm that had brought Rose Whitmore to Caleb Mackenzie's door was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the blizzard brought Rose Whitmore to Caleb Mackenzie's door. 3 days of snow so thick it erased the world beyond the cabin walls, turning everything into an endless expanse of white silence. They were trapped together, and in that forced intimacy, something unexpected began to grow. Morning light filtered through frost-covered windows, painting everything in shades of silver and gold. Rose woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke, sounds of someone moving efficiently in the space below the loft. She'd grown accustomed to these rhythms over the past days. The rasp of Caleb's razor against his beard, which he kept trimmed despite living alone. The clank of the cast-iron skillet, the quiet humming of old songs she didn't recognize. She dressed in the clothes Caleb had fashioned for her from his own wardrobe. Wool pants cut down and belted tight, a flannel shirt that hung to her knees, sleeves rolled up multiple times, thick socks. She looked ridiculous, she was sure, but she was warm and dry and alive. When she climbed down the ladder, Caleb was at the stove, his back to her. He'd let his hair down this morning. It fell past his shoulders in dark waves, surprisingly well kept for a mountain hermit. His frame filled the small kitchen space, all breadth and muscle earned through hard labor. "Morning," he said without turning. Somehow he always knew when she was there. "Coffee's hot." Rose poured herself a cup, savoring the bitter warmth. Real coffee was a luxury up here. Everything had to be hauled up the mountain. Caleb had explained that he made trips to town twice a month for supplies, selling furs and cured venison to pay his way. A simple life. Hard, but honest. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, a routine established. Caleb had made Johnny cakes and fried salt pork. Simple food, but after Philadelphia's boarding house gruel, it tasted like a feast. "Storm's breaking," Caleb said, nodding toward the window. "See how the lights changed?" Rose looked. He was right. The oppressive gray had lifted slightly, revealing patches of pale blue between the clouds. "Which means they'll come back," she said. Not a question. "Likely." Caleb stood, began clearing plates with methodical efficiency. "We need to move. Can't stay here." "Where would we go?" Caleb paused, considering. "There's someone. Old friend. Lives higher up the mountain. If anyone can help us, it's him." Something in his voice told Rose this friend was special. Someone Caleb trusted in a world that had given him precious little reason to trust. They spent the morning preparing. Caleb packed supplies into a leather rucksack, movements practiced and sure. dried meat, hardtack, a small pot, flint and steel, 2 blankets, a hatchet, the Winchester, his father's old Colt revolver which he strapped to his hip. Rose watched, feeling useless. "What can I do?" Caleb glanced at her, then at her feet. "How do they feel?" She flexed her toes, still tender but functional. "Better." "Good. You'll need them." He rummaged in a trunk, pulled out snowshoes. "Ever worn these?" "No." "I'll teach you." Outside, the world had transformed into something alien and beautiful. Snow lay 4 feet deep in places, sculpted by wind into fantastic shapes. Trees bent under white weight. The sky stretched vast and pale above them, clouds breaking apart to reveal glimpses of winter blue. Caleb's horse, a sturdy mountain-bred mare named Ember, stood in the small barn behind the cabin. She nickered at his approach, her breath steaming in the cold air. "Just one horse?" Rose asked. "Don't need more. I'm usually alone." The words held no self-pity, just fact. "You'll ride. I'll walk and lead." He showed her how to strap on the snowshoes, wide frames of bent wood and rawhide webbing. "Keep your legs apart. Don't try to walk normal. Swing from the hip." Rose tried. Immediately tangled the shoes and nearly fell. Caleb caught her elbow, steadied her. "Like this," he said, demonstrating. His movements made it look effortless, a rolling gait that kept the shoes from crossing. It took Rose 20 minutes to manage 10 steps without tripping. Caleb watched patiently, offering quiet corrections. "Better," again. By the time they were ready to leave, Rose could manage a slow, awkward shuffle. It would have to be enough. Caleb helped her onto Ember, his hands strong and sure around her waist. She felt the heat of him even through layers of wool and leather. He stepped back quickly, professional, and took up the reins. They set off into the white wilderness, leaving the cabin behind. Rose looked back once. The small structure seemed impossibly lonely against the vast mountainside, smoke still curling from its chimney. She felt an odd pang of loss. That cabin had saved her life, had been her whole world for 3 days. "We'll come back," Caleb said, reading her expression, "when it's safe." The journey was harder than Rose could have imagined. The cold bit through every layer of clothing. The altitude made breathing difficult, each inhalation sharp as knives. The landscape was beautiful but treacherous, deep ravines hidden under innocent-looking snow, ice-slick rocks waiting to turn an ankle or break a leg. But Caleb moved through it all with the confidence of a man who knew every tree, every stone. He tested the snow depth with a long staff before each step, chose paths that avoided the steepest grades. Twice he stopped, held up a hand for silence, listened to something Rose couldn't hear. Only when he was satisfied did they continue. During one of these pauses, Rose heard it. A distant sound, faint but distinct. Hoofbeats. Caleb heard it too. His jaw tightened. Down. He pulled Ember off the trail into a thick copse of snow-heavy pines. Rose dismounted, crouched beside the horse. Caleb stood at the tree line, watching the trail below. 3 riders appeared, moving slowly through the deep snow. Even at this distance, Rose recognized the lead horse, black with white stockings, Marcus Thornfield's favorite mount, and the man in the saddle, wrapped in an expensive fur coat, could only be Marcus himself. Her breath caught. This was the first time she'd seen him since he'd left her to die. In town, he'd seemed distinguished, silver-haired, handsome in a cold, aristocratic way. Now, watching him search for confirmation of her death, she saw him clearly, saw the cruelty in the set of his mouth, the arrogance in how he sat his horse, like he owned the mountain and everything on it. "She's dead by now," Marcus's voice carried up the slope, clear in the cold air. "No one survives 3 nights in weather like that." "You want us to keep looking?" That was Clayton Reeves, the enforcer. "No. She's gone. We move forward with the campaign." Marcus turned his horse. "Schedule the town hall for 3 days from now. I'll announce my candidacy officially." They rode off, disappearing down the trail. Rose realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out in a shaky exhale. Caleb returned to the cops, his expression grim. He's confident. That's good. Confident men make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind where they stop looking over their shoulders. Caleb helped her back onto Ember. Come on. We've got ground to cover. They climbed higher. The trees changed, became sparse and twisted by constant wind. The air grew thinner, colder. Rose's lungs burned with each breath, but she didn't complain. If Caleb could walk through this, could break trail through snow up to his thighs, she could endure riding. As the sun began its descent, painting the snow in shades of orange and pink, they crested a ridge. Below, in a small sheltered valley, Rose saw a cabin. Smaller than Caleb's, smoke rising from a stone chimney. Red Sky Walker, Caleb said. Cherokee. Been living up here longer than anyone can remember. He knew my grandfather. They descended carefully. As they approached the cabin, the door opened. An old man stepped out, and Rose caught her breath. He was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles, skin like weathered leather. But his eyes were sharp and clear, black as obsidian. He wore a mix of Cherokee and settler clothing, deerskin pants and a wool shirt, his long white hair braided with beads and feathers. Caleb Mackenzie, the old man said, his voice surprisingly strong. The mountain told me you were coming, and you bring trouble. The old kind, Caleb replied. Marcus Thornfield. Red Sky nodded slowly. The shadow that poisons the valley. His gaze shifted to Rose, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. And this one? Rose Whitmore, sir, Rose said, sliding down from Ember. Her legs nearly buckled after hours in the saddle, but she kept her footing. Pleased to meet you. Red Sky's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. Manners, unusual in this place, he gestured to the cabin. Come, night falls quickly in the mountains, and the cold bites hardest in the dark. Inside, the cabin was warm and surprisingly spacious. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, filling the air with earthy scents. A fire burned in a stone hearth. Simple furniture, all handmade, arranged with care. Red Sky made tea, some blend Rose didn't recognize. It tasted of earth and smoke and something faintly sweet. They sat around the fire, and Rose felt tension she hadn't known she was carrying begin to ease. I knew your father, Red Sky said to Caleb. Good man, honest. The mine took him, but Marcus Thornfield killed him. You know about the collapse? Everyone knows. Few dare speak of it. Red Sky's black eyes reflected firelight. Fear is a powerful silence. He turned to Rose. You have warrior spirit. I see it in how you sit, how your eyes move. You have walked through death to reach life. Rose didn't know how to respond to that. Mr. Thornfield tried to kill me, left me in the blizzard. And yet you lived. The mountain chose you. Red Sky sipped his tea. The question is, what will you do with this gift? We need evidence, Caleb said. Something that can't be ignored or bought off. Evidence exists, Red Sky replied. Dr. Harriet Brennan, in town. She treated the survivors after the collapse, wrote down their testimony, kept photographs, papers. Caleb leaned forward. Why hasn't she come forward? To whom? Sheriff Coleman works for Thornfield. Judge Morrison, too. She tried once, 5 years ago. Her house was burned. She barely escaped. Red Sky's voice was matter-of-fact, relating horrors like weather reports. She knows speaking truth in this territory is dangerous. But she kept the evidence, Rose said. She kept it for 5 years. Red Sky nodded approvingly. You understand. Some fights are not abandoned, only postponed. He stood, moved to a shelf, returned with a small carved stone. A bear, rendered in simple lines but unmistakably powerful. He handed it to Caleb. Give her this. She will know I sent you. She will trust you. Caleb turned the stone over in his large hands. How do we get to town without being seen? The old trails, through the high passes, Cherokee paths, older than the settlement. Red Sky's eyes glinted. I will show you the way. They spent the night in Red Sky's cabin, the old man giving them his sleeping loft while he took a pallet by the fire. Rose lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind outside and Caleb's steady breathing beside her. They'd maintained careful distance, a blanket rolled between them like a barrier. But she was aware of him, his warmth, his presence. You awake? Caleb's voice was soft in the darkness. Yes. Scared? Rose considered. Terrified, but also ready. Silence. Then Caleb said, You didn't have to stay. Could have asked me to take you to the next town, somewhere safe. This is my fight now, Rose replied. He tried to kill me. He succeeded in killing your father, your brother, 15 other men. Someone has to stop him. You're braver than you look. Rose smiled in the dark. I look small and useless, you mean? I meant you look like a lady, not like someone who'd face down a killer. My mother was a nurse during the war. She taught me that healing is important, but sometimes you have to fight the disease before you can cure it. Rose turned her head, could just make out Caleb's profile in the dim firelight from below. Marcus Thornfield is a disease. We're the cure. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Your mother sounds like she was something special. She was. Both my parents were. Rose's throat tightened. I wish they could have met you. They'd probably think you were crazy, trusting your life to a mountain hermit. They'd thank you for saving their daughter. Another silence, this one comfortable. Outside a wolf howled, lonely and distant. Rose shivered despite the warmth. Get some sleep, Caleb said. Tomorrow we head for town. Things get more dangerous from here. Morning came cold and clear. Red Sky provided them with provisions and detailed directions to the old Cherokee trails. Before they left, he placed a hand on Rose's shoulder. You have found your path, he said. It will be hard. You will be tested, but you will not walk it alone. His eyes moved to Caleb. Neither of you will. They set out as the sun cleared the eastern peaks, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. The trails Red Sky had shown them were narrow, barely visible, winding through terrain too rough for horses other than mountain-bred stock like Ember. They traveled in silence, conserving energy for the difficult descent. Around midday, they stopped to rest and eat. Caleb built a small fire, heated snow for water. They shared strips of jerky and hardtack, simple food but welcome. Can I ask you something? Rose said. Caleb nodded, chewing. Why did you stay? After the mine collapse, after Marcus got away with it, you could have left, started over somewhere else. Caleb was quiet for so long Rose thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I made a promise to my father as he was dying. His voice roughened. He looked at me, and he said, Promise me you'll get justice. Those were his last words. So you stayed. I stayed, tried everything, talked to lawyers, went to the territorial marshal, even wrote to the governor. Caleb poked the fire with a stick. Nothing worked. Every door closed. Every official already bought. You must have been so angry. I was. Still am. He looked at her directly. But anger without direction is just poison. It eats you from the inside. I was starting to let it kill me, same as that mine killed my pa. What changed? Caleb's mouth quirked, not quite a smile. A stubborn woman showed up half frozen on my doorstep. Reminded me why I stayed. Rose felt warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. I'm glad I knocked on the right door. So am I. They continued their descent. As the afternoon wore on, the trees thickened again, providing cover. They were getting close to the settlement now, close to danger. That's when they heard it. Voices ahead, the jingle of harness. Caleb pulled Ember off the trail immediately, finding cover behind a massive fallen log. Rose dismounted, crouched beside him, barely breathing. 3 men on horseback appeared on the trail below. Clayton Reeves and 2 others Rose didn't recognize. They were moving slowly, searching. "Thornfield wants one more sweep," Clayton was saying. "Make sure there's no trace." "It's been 3 days," one of the others said. "If she ain't dead, she's miles away." "We check anyway. The boss doesn't like loose ends." They were close now, close enough that Rose could see the frost in Clayton's beard, the rifle across his saddle. One of the horses snorted, tossing its head. For a horrible moment, Rose thought it had scented ember. But Caleb's hand was over the mare's nose, gentle but firm, keeping her quiet. His other hand rested on the Winchester. Rose saw the calculation in his eyes. 3 against 1. He could get 1, maybe 2 before they returned fire. The third would escape, raise the alarm. They'd be hunted through these mountains. The men passed within 20 feet. Rose held her breath until her lungs screamed. Finally, mercifully, the sound of hooves faded. Caleb waited a full 5 minutes before relaxing his grip on Ember. The horse blew out a long breath, as if she too had been holding it. "That was close," Rose whispered. "Too close. They're not giving up." Caleb's jaw was set. "We need to move fast. Get to Dr. Brennan before they widen the search." They pushed on, moving more quickly now despite the danger. The sun was setting when they finally glimpsed the town of Stone Creek below them, lights beginning to flicker in windows against the gathering dark. It looked peaceful from up here. Quaint. The kind of frontier town Rose had imagined when she'd answered Marcus's advertisement. A main street lined with shops. A church with a white steeple. Houses clustered together, smoke rising from chimneys. But Rose knew better now. Knew that evil could wear a respectable face. That monsters didn't always look like monsters. "Dr. Brennan lives on the edge of town," Caleb said, pointing. "That house there, set back from the others. We'll wait for full dark, then approach from behind." They settled in to wait, hidden in the tree line. Rose watched the town come alive with evening activity. People walking between buildings, a wagon rolling down the main street. Everything normal. Everyone going about their lives, unaware that in 3 days, Marcus Thornfield planned to announce his candidacy for state senate. Unaware that a man who'd killed 17 people was about to ask for their votes. "Soon," Caleb murmured beside her, "soon everyone will know what he is." Rose looked at him, this mountain man who'd saved her life and was now risking his own for justice. His profile was strong against the darkening sky, all hard lines and determination. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Caleb turned, met her eyes. Something passed between them then, something that had been building since that first night. Recognition, understanding, trust. And beneath it all, something deeper. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. "Thank me when this is over," Caleb said, but his voice was gentle. As darkness fell complete, they began their descent toward Dr. Harriet Brennan's house, carrying with them hope and evidence and the promise of justice 5 years delayed. Behind them, the mountains stood silent and watchful. Below them, a town slept, unaware that everything was about to change. The house sat at the edge of Stone Creek like a woman who'd learned to keep her distance. A modest 2-story structure, white paint weathered to gray, windows glowing warm against the winter darkness. Dr. Harriet Brennan's practice occupied the first floor, her living quarters above. A hand-painted sign swung gently in the night breeze. Medicine, surgery, midwifery. Caleb and Rose approached from the rear, moving through shadows cast by a half-moon. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Caleb had left Ember tied in a copse of trees a quarter-mile back, hidden but ready for quick escape if needed. The back door stood before them, solid oak with a small window curtained against the night. Caleb knocked, 3 soft raps. Waited. Knocked again, a pattern. 2 quick, 1 slow. A light appeared, flickering candlelight approaching the door. The curtain moved aside, revealing a face. A woman, late 50s or early 60s, steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles assessed them with the practiced evaluation of someone who'd seen every kind of trouble humanity could produce. "Who's there?" Her voice was firm, unafraid, the kind of voice that had ordered men twice her size out of her surgery. Caleb held up Red Skywalker's carved stone, positioning it where the light would catch it. The woman's eyes widened. The sound of multiple locks being undone followed. The door opened. "Caleb Mackenzie," she said. It wasn't a question. "I wondered when you'd come. And who's this?" "Rose Whitmore, ma'am," Rose said, and something in Dr. Brennan's expression shifted. Recognition, horror, understanding. "The mail-order bride, the one who died." Dr. Brennan stepped back. "Get inside, quickly." They entered a warm kitchen, herbs drying from ceiling beams, the smell of carbolic and camphor underlying everything. The tools of a frontier physician. Dr. Brennan locked the door behind them, all 3 bolts, then turned to study Rose with clinical intensity. "You look remarkably healthy for a corpse," she said dryly. "The reports of my death were premature," Rose replied. A ghost of a smile crossed the doctor's stern face. "Marcus Thornfield's doing, I assume. He left me in the blizzard, pointed me in the wrong direction and rode away." Rose's voice was steady, but Caleb heard the tremor beneath, the remembered terror. Dr. Brennan nodded, unsurprised. "That sounds like Marcus. Efficient, deniable." She gestured to the table. "Sit. You must be exhausted. When did you last eat a proper meal?" "This morning," Caleb said. "We're fine." "You're not fine. You're half-starved and you've been traveling in brutal cold." The doctor's tone brooked no argument. "I'm making coffee and fixing food. While I do, you'll tell me why you're here." As Dr. Brennan moved about her kitchen with brisk efficiency, Caleb explained. The rescue, the discovery of Rose's identity, the men searching, their visit to Red Skywalker. "He said you had evidence," Caleb finished, "from the mine collapse." Dr. Brennan paused, coffee pot in hand. For a long moment she was silent, and Caleb saw something he recognized, the weight of 5 years, the burden of truth carried alone. "I do," she said finally. "I've kept it hidden, waiting." "For what?" Rose asked gently. "For someone brave enough to use it." Dr. Brennan poured coffee, set out bread and cold chicken. "Sit, eat, then I'll show you." They ate, and Caleb realized how hungry he actually was. The doctor's bread was fresh, probably baked that morning. The chicken was seasoned with herbs, simple food made with care. The kind of meal that reminded you civilization still existed, even on the edge of wilderness. When they'd finished, Dr. Brennan stood. "Follow me." She led them upstairs to her private quarters, a bedroom, sparse but comfortable, a small sitting room lined with medical texts, and in the corner a trunk, heavy oak, brass-bound, locked with a mechanism more complex than any ordinary chest would require. Dr. Brennan knelt, worked the locks. The trunk opened with a sigh, as if it had been holding its breath for 5 years. Inside lay the evidence. Papers, neatly organized in folders. Photographs, stark and terrible. Ledgers filled with meticulous handwriting. "I treated 17 survivors," Dr. Brennan said, her voice clinical now, the physician recounting case notes. "Men who'd been near the entrance when the collapse happened. Men who crawled out through smoke and dust and the screams of their friends dying behind them." She pulled out a folder, opened it. Caleb saw his father's name at the top of a page, his vision blurred. He blinked hard. "I wrote down everything they told me," the doctor continued. "How they'd reported cracks in the support beams weeks before. How Marcus Thornfield had dismissed their concerns. How he'd cut the safety budget to increase profits." She pulled out photographs next. Images of the mine entrance, timbers splintered like broken bones. Close-ups of support beams, cracks clearly visible, dated 3 weeks before the collapse. These were taken by a mining inspector from Charleston. Marcus had him run out of town before he could file his report, but I had copies. The ledgers came last, account books showing where Marcus had reallocated funds. Money meant for safety equipment redirected to his personal accounts, line after line of evidence, damning and clear. Rose leaned over the papers, her nursing training allowing her to read the medical terminology. "This is comprehensive, irrefutable." "I know," Dr. Brennan said. "I tried to bring it forward once, 5 years ago. Went to Sheriff Coleman with everything." "What happened?" Caleb asked, though part of him already knew. "That night, my house caught fire. The old house on Main Street. I barely escaped with my life. Lost everything except this." She gestured to the trunk. "I'd hidden it here, in my surgery, because I didn't trust anyone." "The sheriff," Rose said, "or Marcus himself. Doesn't matter which." The message was clear. Dr. Brennan's jaw set. "But I kept these. Kept them safe. Kept them hidden, waiting for the right moment." Caleb felt something unclenching in his chest. 5 years of failure, of doors closing, of justice denied. And here it was. Everything he'd needed. Everything he'd tried and failed to find. "Why now?" he asked. "Why didn't you try again?" "To whom?" "Judge Morrison is Marcus's hunting partner. The territorial marshal takes weeks to respond, if he responds at all, Doctor." Brennan met his eyes. "I needed someone Marcus couldn't buy, someone with nothing left to lose, someone who'd fight." "And you think that's me?" "I know it is. I treated your father, Caleb. I was there when he died. I heard what he asked of you." Her voice softened. "I know you've spent 5 years trying to keep that promise. Now you can." A knock at the back door shattered the moment. All three froze. The knock came again, followed by a familiar voice. "Dr. Brennan, it's Jake Whitmore. I need help." Rose's eyes widened. "Whitmore? That's my family name." Dr. Brennan moved quickly, descending the stairs. Caleb followed, hand on his Colt. The doctor opened the door to reveal a tall man, weathered by outdoor life, blood seeping through a bandage on his arm. "Jake," Dr. Brennan said. "What happened?" "Ran into a bear trap up near Copper Ridge. Need stitching." The man's eyes moved past her to Caleb, then to Rose. He stopped, stared. "You," he said to Rose. "You look like someone I knew. Captain James Whitmore. Had his portrait in the Union Hall in Philadelphia." Rose took a step forward. "James Whitmore was my father." Jake's face transformed. "Your father? Then you're my cousin. Second cousin, but family." He looked at Dr. Brennan. "This is the woman they said died in the blizzard." "She didn't die," Dr. Brennan said, pulling Jake inside and locking the door. "She survived, and she's here to help us bring down Marcus Thornfield." As the doctor worked on Jake's arm, the trapper told his story. He'd been hunting in the high country, heard rumors in town about a woman who'd perished in the storm. When he'd heard the name Whitmore, something clicked. "Your father," Jake said to Rose, wincing as Dr. Brennan stitched. "His ship went down 5 years ago, Atlantic crossing, whole crew lost." "I know," Rose said softly. "What you might not know is who insured that ship." Jake's eyes were hard. "Thornfield Maritime Insurance Company, owned by Marcus's brother. They denied the claim, said it was negligent seamanship." Rose's hand went to her mouth. "What?" "Captain Whitmore was one of the best sailors on the Atlantic run. Everyone knew it. But the insurance company claimed otherwise. Your family got nothing. The company kept the payout." Jake's voice was bitter. "Marcus's reach goes further than this territory. He's got fingers in business all up and down the coast." Caleb watched Rose process this, saw the pieces falling into place. Her father's death, her mother's grief, the poverty that followed, the desperation that led her to answer a mail-order bride advertisement. "He's been destroying lives for years," Rose whispered. "Decades," Dr. Brennan corrected, finishing Jake's stitches. "I've been in this territory for 20 years. I've watched Marcus Thornfield build his empire on the backs of good people. The mine collapse was just the most visible tragedy." Jake stood, testing his arm. "If you're planning something, count me in. I know these mountains better than anyone except maybe Red Sky. I can get you anywhere you need to go unseen." "We need to get this evidence to someone who can use it," Caleb said. "Someone beyond Marcus's influence." "Federal Marshal in Charleston," Dr. Brennan suggested. "Hayes Lincoln. He's honest, from what I hear." "That's 3 days' ride," Jake said, "through territory Marcus controls." "Then we don't go to Charleston," Rose said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "We bring Charleston here." "What do you mean?" Caleb asked. Rose's eyes were bright, mind working. "Marcus is announcing his candidacy in 3 days. Town meeting, public event. Everyone will be there." "Including the press," Dr. Brennan said slowly, understanding dawning. "Including witnesses," Rose continued. "The families of the men who died. If we can get them to stand up, to speak out, with this evidence to back them up." "Marcus will have his men there," Jake warned. "Sheriff Coleman, Clayton Reeves. It'll be dangerous." "Everything has been dangerous," Rose said firmly. "Marcus tried to kill me. He succeeded in killing 17 men. He destroyed my father and ruined my family. Someone has to stop him." Caleb felt pride surge through him. This was not the half-frozen woman he'd found on his doorstep. This was someone who'd found her strength in the crucible of survival. "She's right," he said. "We make our stand in public, force Marcus to answer for his crimes where everyone can see." "We'll need allies," Dr. Brennan said. "The families. They're scared, but they deserve to know justice is possible." "I can reach them," Jake offered. "I know most of them. They trust me." They spent the next hour planning. Dr. Brennan would make copies of the most damning documents, in case the originals were destroyed. Jake would visit the families, quietly, one by one. Plant the seeds of courage. Caleb and Rose would stay hidden, preparing. As midnight approached, Jake prepared to leave. At the door he turned to Rose. "Your father was a good man," he said. "I only met him once at a family gathering when I was young, but I remember him, honest, fair. He'd be proud of you." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." After Jake left, Dr. Brennan showed them to a small room behind her surgery. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we start gathering allies. 3 days from now, we change everything." Alone in the small room, Rose finally let the exhaustion show. She sat on the narrow bed, shoulders sagging. Caleb pulled up the room's single chair, sat facing her. "You don't have to do this. Could still leave. Head east while you have the chance." "And go where?" Rose looked at him. "Back to Philadelphia, to nothing, to a city that holds only memories of loss?" She shook her head. "This is where I belong now. Here, fighting this fight." "It could get you killed. Living in fear is another kind of death." Rose reached out, took his hand. Her fingers were small and fine-boned against his work-roughened palm. "Besides, I'm not alone. I have you. Dr. Brennan, Jake, Red Sky Walker. Maybe that's what family really is. Not blood, but choice." Caleb looked at their joined hands, felt something shift in his chest. For 5 years he'd been alone, carrying his promise, his grief, his anger in isolation. Now, suddenly, he had this: partnership, purpose, something that felt dangerously like hope. 3 days, he said quietly. 3 days, Rose agreed. And then Marcus Thornfield answers for everything. Outside, the town of Stone Creek slept under winter stars. In 3 days, it would wake to truth, to justice, to the reckoning that had been 5 years in the making. And in a mansion on the hill, Marcus Thornfield slept soundly, dreaming of power and politics, unaware that the woman he'd tried to kill was very much alive and coming for him with evidence that would destroy everything he'd built. The mountain had chosen her to survive. Now she would choose to fight. 2 days remained before Marcus Thornfield's town hall announcement. 2 days to turn fear into courage, silence into testimony, and scattered grief into unified justice. The work began before dawn. Jake Whitmore moved through Stone Creek like a ghost, visiting homes in the thin gray light before the town fully woke. At each door, he spoke the same words. Your husband, your father, your son. They deserve justice. We have evidence. We have witnesses. Will you stand with us? The first house belonged to Martha Jensen, who ran the boarding house on 2nd Street. Her husband Thomas had been a shift foreman, 32 years old when the mine took him. She opened her door to Jake's knock, face lined with the kind of exhaustion that comes from 5 years of grief carried alone. Mrs. Jensen, Jake said quietly, I need 5 minutes of your time. She looked at him, this weathered mountain man she'd known for years, and something in his expression made her step aside. Let him in. Inside, in a kitchen that smelled of coffee and old sorrow, Jake told her everything. About Rose Whitmore, left to die in the blizzard. About Dr. Brennan's evidence, hidden for 5 years. About Caleb McKenzie, still keeping his promise to a dying father. We're going to expose him, Jake said, at the town meeting, in front of everyone. But we need the families, need you to stand up and speak the truth you've been too afraid to tell. Martha's hands trembled around her coffee cup. Clayton Reeves burned Dr. Brennan's house. You know that. You think he won't do worse if we speak out? I think he'll do worse if we stay silent. Men like Marcus Thornfield, they count on fear. They build empires on it. Jake leaned forward. But what if we're not afraid anymore? What if 17 families stand together? Martha closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears tracked down her weathered cheeks. Thomas was a good man. He told me about the cracks, about how Marcus wouldn't listen. He was scared those last weeks, knew something bad was coming. Her voice broke. I want Marcus to pay. God help me, I want him to suffer like my Thomas suffered. Then stand with us, 2 days from now. Be ready. Martha nodded slowly. I'll be there. At the second house, a young man answered the door. Daniel Cooper, 19 years old, who'd been 12 when the mine took his father. He worked odd jobs now, barely scraping by, supporting his mother and 3 younger sisters. Jake told the story again, watched understanding dawn in the young man's eyes, then anger, hot and righteous. My pa knew, Daniel said, his voice shaking. Knew the mine wasn't safe, but we needed the money. 4 kids to feed, another on the way. He slammed his fist against the door frame. Marcus Thornfield killed him for profit. And we got nothing, not even an apology. You can get justice, Jake said. But I need you strong, not angry. Anger makes mistakes. We need to be smart. Daniel took a breath, forced himself calm. What do you need me to do? Be ready to speak. Tell what you know. Stand with the other families. Jake put a hand on the young man's shoulder and spread the word, quietly. Everyone who lost someone in that mine, tell them it's time. One by one, Jake visited the homes of the dead. 17 men, 17 families shattered by Marcus Thornfield's greed. Some turned him away, too frightened to hope, but more listened, more agreed, more felt the ember of courage beginning to glow in the ash of their grief. By noon, 11 families had committed to stand. By evening, 15. While Jake worked this town, Caleb and Rose remained hidden in Dr. Brennan's spare room organizing evidence. The doctor had a portable printing press, used for making handbills about health matters. Now they used it to create copies of the most damning documents. Account ledgers showing the diverted safety funds, photographs of the structural cracks, testimony from survivors written in Dr. Brennan's precise medical hand. Caleb worked methodically, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate papers. Rose watched him, this mountain man who'd saved her life and was now risking his own for a promise made to a dying father. She saw the grief that still lived in him, the weight of 5 years carrying justice on his shoulders alone. "Tell me about your brother," she said softly. Caleb's hands stilled on the printing press. For a moment Rose thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, voice rough with memory. Samuel was 19, smart as a whip. Wanted to be a teacher, but teachers don't earn enough to help support a family. Caleb smiled, sad and distant. He used to read to me. Poetry, mostly. Said the mind was dark enough without letting darkness into your mind, too. He sounds special. He was. Caleb resumed his work, but slower now. The day of the collapse, Sam wasn't supposed to be working. Had the day off. But another man was sick, asked Sam to take his shift. Sam said yes because that's who he was. Always helping. Rose felt her throat tighten. I found him next to Pa. They'd tried to shield each other when the timber came down. Died holding hands. Caleb's voice cracked. Sam was still holding Pa's poetry book. Had it in his jacket. It survived. He didn't. Rose moved to stand beside him, placed her hand over his. They stood that way for a long moment, the printing press forgotten, two people who'd lost everything finding something like comfort in shared grief. We'll make it right, Rose said. For your father, for Samuel, for all of them. Caleb nodded, unable to speak. The door opened. Dr. Brennan entered, followed by an unexpected visitor. A man in his 50s, stocky and weathered, wearing a sheriff's star, Sheriff Wade Coleman. Caleb's hand went to his Colt. Rose stepped back, eyes wide with alarm. Easy, Dr. Brennan said quickly. He's here to help. Help? Caleb's voice was dangerous. He's in Marcus's pocket. He burned your house. No, Sheriff Coleman said quietly. Clayton Reeves burned her house, on Marcus's orders. I looked the other way and I've regretted it every day since. Why should we believe you? Rose demanded. The sheriff's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly older, carrying his own weight of shame. Because Thomas Mackenzie was my best friend. Had been since we were 8 years old, fishing in Copper Creek. He looked at Caleb. Your pa and I grew up together. He was the best man at my wedding, godfather to my daughter. Caleb's hand remained on his weapon. Then why didn't you help him? Why didn't you investigate the mine? Because I was scared. Because Marcus owns this town, and I have a family to protect. Coleman's voice broke. Because I'm a coward who let his best friend's death go unpunished. Why now? Dr. Brennan asked. Why come forward after 5 years? Because Jake Whitmore came to my house this morning. Told me what you're planning. Told me Rose Whitmore survived Marcus's attempt to murder her. The sheriff looked at Rose. I've spent 5 years looking the other way, pretending justice doesn't matter. But you, miss, you walked through a blizzard Marcus meant to kill you with. You could have run, could have gotten on the first train east and never looked back. Instead, you're here, planning to face him down. He turned back to Caleb. If someone that brave is willing to fight, then maybe I can stop being a coward. Maybe I can finally do what I should have done 5 years ago. Caleb studied the sheriff's face, searching for deception. Found only shame and determination and something that looked like hope. What are you offering? Caleb asked finally. Protection, testimony, and this. Coleman pulled a paper from his jacket. Marcus had me file a death certificate for Rose Whitmore, official documents saying she died in the blizzard. Her appearing alive makes him guilty of filing a false report at minimum, filing with intent to cover up attempted murder at most. Rose took the paper, read her own death certificate. Seeing her name, her age, cause of death listed as exposure to elements. It made her feel strange, ghostly, as if she'd somehow died and come back. This helps, Dr. Brennan said. It's proof of intent. There's more. Coleman hesitated. I was there the night before the collapse. Overheard Marcus talking to his mine manager. Marcus said, and I quote, I don't care about cracks. Those men are paid to take risks. We're not shutting down for repairs. You heard him say this? Caleb's voice was tight. I did. I was in the back room of the saloon. Marcus didn't know I was there. At the time, I thought it was just businessman talk. Hard, but not criminal. Coleman's face twisted. I was wrong, and the next day, 17 good men died. Will you testify to that? Rose asked. Publicly? That's why I'm here. Coleman met her eyes. At the town meeting. I'll stand up and tell what I heard. Tell about the death certificate, whatever it takes. Caleb released his grip on the Colt. If you're lying, if this is some trap Marcus set, then I'll be standing in front of the whole town calling him a murderer. You think Marcus would risk that for a trap? Coleman shook his head. No, son. I'm done being his lapdog. It's cost me too much already. Dr. Brennan moved to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Then we drink to unlikely allies. She poured 4 glasses, handed them around. To justice, however late it comes. They drank, the whiskey burning warm, sealing the pact. That night, as the town slept, a final piece fell into place. A knock came at Dr. Brennan's back door near midnight. Caleb answered, gun drawn, to find a young woman standing in the moonlight. She was perhaps 25, wrapped in a cloak, face pale with fear and determination. My name is Sarah Thornfield, she said. I'm Marcus's niece, and I have information you need. The room went silent. Caleb pulled her inside quickly, checked to ensure she hadn't been followed. Dr. Brennan lit more lamps. They all stared at this unexpected visitor, this blood relative of their enemy. Why are you here? Rose asked. Sarah removed her cloak with shaking hands. Beneath, her dress was simple but well made, the clothes of wealth but not ostentation. Because my uncle is a monster, and I can't stay silent anymore. She sat at the table, accepted the tea Dr. Brennan offered. I grew up in his household after my parents died. He raised me, paid for my education, gave me everything. Her voice was hollow. And I watched him destroy lives without remorse. The mine collapse? Caleb asked. I overheard him talking to Clayton Reeves the week before. Marcus knew about the cracks. He said, let them work until it falls. Men are cheaper than timber. Sarah's hands trembled around her teacup. I was 17. I didn't understand what he meant. But after the collapse, after I saw the funerals, the widows, the children, she closed her eyes. I understood. You could have come forward then, Dr. Brennan said, not unkindly. I was afraid. He's my family, my only family. And I was young, and I told myself maybe I'd misheard. Sarah looked up, tears on her cheeks. But then tonight, I heard him talking to Clayton again. About a woman named Rose Whitmore. About how her death was fortuitous. About how the certificate was filed and the problem solved. Rose felt ice slide down her spine. He thinks I'm dead. He does, and he's pleased about it. He called you a potential complication that Winter conveniently resolved. Sarah turned to Rose. When I heard him talk about you like that, talk about your death like it was a business advantage, I knew I couldn't be silent anymore. I won't let him kill again. What are you offering? Caleb asked. Testimony. Everything I've heard over the years. The deals he's made, the people he's threatened, the laws he's broken. Sarah's voice strengthened. And I have documents, letters, financial records. He keeps everything in his study, thinks no one would dare look. You took them? Dr. Brennan leaned forward. Copied them. Over the past 6 months, whenever he was away. I knew someday they'd be needed. Sarah pulled a folded paper from inside her dress. This is an account ledger. It shows payments to Sheriff Coleman, Judge Morrison, and 3 territorial officials. Bribes, all of them. Coleman, standing by the door, flinched but didn't deny it. I have more hidden, Sarah continued. 6 months of documentation. Enough to destroy him completely. Caleb looked at this young woman who was betraying her only family for the sake of justice. You know what this will cost you. He's your uncle. He'll disown you. You'll have nothing. I'll have my conscience, Sarah said firmly. And that's more than I have now. She looked around at the gathered faces. When is the confrontation? Tomorrow evening. Town meeting. Dr. Brennan studied Sarah. You're certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything. Sarah's jaw set. My uncle has traded on the Thornfield name my entire life, made it synonymous with success and power. Tomorrow the world learns what it really means: cruelty, greed, murder. Rose reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. Thank you. What you're doing, the courage it takes. You walked through a blizzard he meant to kill you with, Sarah replied. That's courage. This is just long overdue honesty. They worked through the night, organizing Sarah's documents alongside Dr. Brennan's evidence. As dawn approached, they had something devastating, irrefutable, comprehensive. Caleb stood at the window, watching the sky lighten over Stone Creek. One day remained, one final day before the reckoning. Rose came to stand beside him. They'd been through so much in these past days: storm and survival, flight and planning. They'd become something more than rescuer and rescued. They'd become partners, allies, friends, maybe more. Are you afraid? Rose asked quietly. Terrified, Caleb admitted. Marcus won't go down easy. He'll fight. Could get bloody. Then we'll fight back. Together. Caleb looked at her, this woman who'd arrived half frozen on his doorstep and was now planning to face down a killer in front of the entire town. She was extraordinary. Brave in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength and everything to do with moral courage. When this is over, he said slowly, when Marcus is in chains and justice is served, what will you do? Rose smiled. I thought I might stay, if you'd have me. The mountain seems to agree with me. The mountain nearly killed you. The mountain led me to you. Rose turned to face him fully. I came west looking for a home, for somewhere to belong. I found it, Caleb, not in a mansion or a town, but in a cabin on a mountainside with a man who keeps his promises. Caleb felt his throat tighten. You deserve better than a mountain hermit. I deserve exactly what I choose, and I choose you. Choose this fight. Choose this place. Rose's green eyes held his. If you'll have me. Before Caleb could answer, Dr. Brennan called from the kitchen. Dawn's breaking. Time to make final preparations. Tomorrow night we change everything. They turned from the window, from the intimate moment, back to the work of justice. But something had shifted between them, something acknowledged if not yet fully explored. Tomorrow they would face Marcus Thornfield with evidence and allies and the power of truth. Tomorrow 17 families would find their voices. Tomorrow a town would choose between complicity and courage. Tomorrow the reckoning would come. But tonight, in a room filled with documents and determination, Caleb Mackenzie and Rose Whitmore stood side by side, ready to keep a promise 5 years in the making. The mountain had brought them together. Now they would bring Marcus Thornfield down. The day of reckoning dawned cold and clear over Stone Creek. The sky stretched pale blue above snow-covered rooftops, the kind of winter morning that promised bitter cold by nightfall. In homes throughout the town, 17 families woke with a mixture of dread and hope, preparing to speak truths they'd kept silent for 5 years. The town meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock at the community hall, a large timber building on Main Street that served as church, courthouse, and gathering place. By 6:30 people had begun arriving, stomping snow from their boots, filling the rows of wooden benches. They came curious, drawn by rumors that had circulated through Stone Creek like smoke through timber. Something was happening tonight. Something important. Marcus Thornfield arrived at 6:45, stepping from a polished black carriage pulled by matched horses. He wore a suit of fine eastern wool, his silver hair swept back, diamond stickpin glinting in his cravat. Power and respectability radiated from him like heat from a stove. Clayton Reeves walked at his shoulder, eyes scanning the crowd with professional wariness. 6 more of Marcus's men spread through the hall, positioned at doors and along walls. Security, Marcus would say if anyone asked. Protection for a prominent citizen? Control, Caleb thought from his position in the back corner. Marcus was making sure no one disrupted his performance. Caleb wore his cleanest shirt, beard trimmed, hair tied back. He looked almost civilized. Almost. But the Colt still rode on his hip, and the Winchester leaned against the wall within reach. Jake Whitmore stood nearby, equally armed, equally watchful. Rose waited in Dr. Brennan's office 3 buildings down, hidden until the right moment. The plan was precise. Let Marcus make his speech. Let him present himself as the town's benefactor, the successful businessman ready to represent their interests in the state senate. Let him reach the peak of his pride, then bring him down where everyone could see. Sheriff Coleman sat in the 3rd row, uniform pressed, star polished. His presence was a statement. The law would be watching tonight. The families of the 17 dead miners scattered throughout the hall. Martha Jensen in the 4th row, face set with determination. Daniel Cooper near the back, his mother and 3 sisters beside him. Widow after widow, child after child, an entire community touched by one man's greed. Marcus took the podium at precisely 7 o'clock. The hall fell silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting, sensing the importance of this moment. "My friends," Marcus began, his voice rich and commanding. "My neighbors, I stand before you tonight humbled by your presence, grateful for this opportunity to address you." Caleb's jaw clenched. The words were smooth as oil, practiced and perfect. "For 20 years I have called Stone Creek home. I have built businesses here, created employment, contributed to the growth of this community." Marcus's eyes swept the crowd, making contact, drawing them in. "I have seen this town transform from a rough mining camp into a thriving center of commerce and civilization." Someone in the front row applauded. Others joined, a ripple of approval moving through the hall. Marcus smiled, humble and pleased. "Tonight, I announce my candidacy for the state senate. I do so not out of personal ambition, but because I believe this territory, these people, deserve representation by someone who understands the challenges we face." Marcus placed his hand over his heart. "Someone who has walked alongside you, who shares your struggles, who has invested everything in our collective future." More applause. Caleb forced himself to remain still, to wait. Timing was everything. "I know there have been tragedies," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a tone of practiced sympathy. 5 years ago, we lost 17 good men in the mine collapse, a terrible accident that affected us all deeply. Martha Jensen's hands clenched in her lap. Daniel Cooper's jaw worked with suppressed anger. "I have carried that burden every day since," Marcus said, and Caleb had to admit the performance was masterful. The man almost sounded sincere. "Those men were my employees, yes, but more than that they were neighbors, friends, the backbone of our community." He paused, letting the moment breathe. "Tonight, I pledge that if elected, I will work tirelessly to prevent such tragedies, to ensure worker safety, to build a future where no family need suffer as those families suffered." The applause was louder now. People were believing him. Caleb saw it in their faces, the way they leaned forward, wanting to trust this confident man who promised protection and prosperity. Jake caught Caleb's eye, nodded slightly. "Time." Jake slipped out the back door, moving quickly through the cold night to Dr. Brennan's office. Rose was waiting, wrapped in a heavy cloak, the folder of evidence clutched to her chest. "He's in full performance," Jake said. "Got the crowd eating from his hand. You ready?" Rose took a deep breath. "I'm ready." They moved through the darkness, Rose's heart hammering. This was it. The moment everything changed. She thought of her father, dying in cold Atlantic waters because Marcus's brother's company had cut corners on ship insurance. She thought of Caleb's father and brother, crushed in a mine collapse that could have been prevented. She thought of herself, crawling through snow, left to die because she'd been an inconvenience. No more. Inside the hall, Marcus was building to his conclusion. "I ask for your support, your trust, your votes. Together, we can build a territory worthy of statehood, a community worthy of our children's future." He spread his arms wide, a man offering everything, asking only for their faith. Together, we can achieve greatness." The applause began, building like a wave. Marcus smiled, victorious. This was his moment, his triumph. Then the back door opened. Rose Whitmore stepped into the hall, throwing back her hood. Every head turned. The applause died like a candle snuffed. For a long, frozen moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Marcus Thornfield's face went white as snow, then gray, then a mottled, ugly red. "Good evening," Rose said, her voice carrying clear and strong through the shocked silence. "I apologize for being late. It took me a while to walk back from the mountain where Mr. Thornfield left me to die." The hall erupted, voices rising, questions shouted. Marcus gripped the podium, knuckles white. "This is," he began, then stopped, tried again. "This woman is clearly confused, suffering from exposure to the elements." "I am Rose Whitmore," Rose continued, walking down the center aisle, each step measured, each word clear. "I came to Stone Creek as Mr. Thornfield's mail-order bride. He met me at the station on the morning of December 15th. He looked at me, decided I was unsuitable, and had his driver take me into the mountains." She reached the front of the hall, stood 10 feet from Marcus, met his eyes without flinching. "He gave me this letter." Rose held up the document. "Dissolving our agreement." He pointed me toward what he said was the town. It wasn't. It was 8 miles into the high country, in the wrong direction, in a blizzard. "You're obviously disturbed," Marcus tried, but his voice had lost its polish. "I sent you back to town. You must have gotten lost." "I have witnesses," Rose said, "and evidence. But first, let's talk about why you wanted me dead." She turned to face the crowd. "You all received word that I perished in the storm. You saw my death certificate, but I'm very much alive, as you can see, which means someone filed a false death certificate." Rose looked at Sheriff Coleman. "Isn't that right, Sheriff?" Coleman stood slowly. "That's right, miss. Marcus Thornfield asked me to file that certificate, said it would save you the embarrassment of a failed marriage attempt." "But I wasn't dead," Rose said, "which makes that document evidence of attempted murder covered up with fraud." Marcus slammed his hand on the podium. "This is slander. Sheriff, arrest this woman." "On what charge?" Coleman asked, and there was steel in his voice now. "Being alive?" Caleb moved from his position in the back, walking forward. The crowd parted for him, recognizing the mountain man who'd lived in isolation since the mine collapse. Whispers followed him. "That's Thomas Mackenzie's son. That's Bear Mackenzie. Thought he'd left the territory." "While we're talking about death certificates," Caleb said, his voice carrying the weight of 5 years' grief, "let's talk about 17 that were real. 17 men who died because you cut safety costs to increase profits." "The mine collapse was investigated," Marcus said quickly. "Deemed an unfortunate accident." "Investigated by men you paid," Dr. Brennan said, standing from her seat in the second row. She moved to join Caleb and Rose, carrying a leather satchel. "I have the proof right here. Testimony from survivors. Photographs of structural damage that was reported and ignored. Account ledgers showing where you diverted safety funds." "This is absurd," Marcus snarled. "Sheriff, I demand these people be removed." "I think we should hear them out," Coleman said, "seeing as how you've been lying to this town for 5 years. Martha Jensen rose from her seat. Her voice shook but carried. "My husband told me about the cracks in the support beams. Told me he'd reported them. Told me Marcus Thornfield said to keep working anyway." Daniel Cooper stood. "My father knew that mine was dangerous. He was scared. But we needed the money, and Marcus said it was safe." One by one, family members of the dead miners stood, a forest of witnesses rising in accusation. "Your mine killed 17 good men," Caleb said. "You knew it was unsafe. You were warned repeatedly, but you chose profit over lives." Marcus's composure was cracking, the mask of respectability slipping. "You have no proof, just the word of grieving families desperate to blame someone." "Actually," a new voice said from the side door, "we have quite a bit more than that." Sarah Thornfield stepped into the hall. Marcus's face went from red to purple. "Sarah," he said, and there was warning in his voice. "What are you doing?" "Telling the truth, Uncle." Sarah walked to stand with the others, a line of accusers facing one man. "I've heard you talk about these people like they were cattle, like their lives meant nothing." She pulled papers from inside her coat. "I have 6 months of documentation, letters, financial records, bribes paid to officials, everything." "You ungrateful little—" Marcus started forward, hand raised. Caleb stepped between them. "Don't." The two men faced each other. Marcus, wealthy and powerful, accustomed to controlling everything around him. Caleb, mountain-hardened and driven by a promise to a dying father. "You took everything from me," Caleb said quietly. "My father, my brother, my future. You built your empire on their graves." "They were miners," Marcus spat. "They accepted the risks when they took the job." The hall gasped. That single statement, spoken in anger, revealed more than all the evidence combined. This was what Marcus Thornfield truly believed, that some lives mattered less than others, that workers were expendable in the pursuit of profit. "He just confessed," Coleman said, standing. "In front of 100 witnesses, he just admitted negligence." "I admitted nothing," Marcus snarled. But he knew. They all knew. In his rage, he'd spoken his truth. Reverend Hale stood from the front pew. "I buried 17 men 5 years ago. I comforted their families. I prayed over graves that held good, honest workers whose only crime was needing employment." His voice was stern as judgment. "Marcus Thornfield, you are not fit to represent this community. You're not fit to live among decent people." More people stood. The dam had broken. Fear dissolved in the face of collective courage. Voice after voice rose, speaking truths long suppressed. "You threatened my business when I tried to organize a safety committee. You had my son beaten for talking to a reporter. You told me my husband's death was his own fault for being careless." The accusations built like a storm, and Marcus stood at the center, his empire crumbling around him. Clayton Reeves moved toward the podium, hand on his gun. Jake was faster, rifle suddenly pointed. "Don't!" The other hired guns looked at each other, looked at the crowd of angry citizens, looked at their employer being torn apart by truth. One by one, they moved toward the doors. Abandoning ship, Marcus stood alone. "Sheriff Coleman," Caleb said formally, "I'm making a citizen's accusation of criminal negligence resulting in death. 17 counts." "Seconded," Dr. Brennan said. "I have medical testimony." "Thirded," Sarah Thornfield said quietly. "I have documentary evidence." Coleman walked to the podium, pulled handcuffs from his belt. "Marcus Thornfield, you're under arrest." "On what authority?" Marcus demanded. "You work for me. I work for the people of this territory, and I'm done being your bought dog." Coleman grabbed Marcus's arm. "I'm also charging you with bribery of a law enforcement officer, filing false official documents, and attempted murder of Rose Whitmore." Marcus jerked back. "You can't prove any of this." "We can prove all of it," Rose said. She opened the folder, held up papers for the crowd to see. Testimony, photographs, financial records, letters in your own hand, everything. Marcus's eyes darted around the hall, seeking escape, finding none. His men had fled. His allies remained silent. The citizens who'd once feared him now stood as a unified wall of justice. "This isn't over," Marcus said. "I have lawyers, connections. You're all making a terrible mistake." "The only mistake," Caleb said, "was thinking you could kill 17 men and face no consequences. Was thinking you could try to murder Rose and walk away. Was thinking this territory would stay silent forever." Coleman snapped the handcuffs on Marcus's wrists. The sound echoed through the hall like a judge's gavel. Final. Irreversible. "Take him to the territorial marshal," someone shouted. "Don't trust him to local jail." "Agreed," Coleman said. "I'll escort him to Charleston myself. Make sure he reaches federal custody." As Coleman led Marcus toward the door, the former power broker's face twisted with rage and desperation. "You're all going to regret this. Every one of you. I'll destroy this town. You're done destroying anything," Rose said quietly, but her voice carried. "The only thing being destroyed tonight is the lie you've been selling for 20 years. The hall erupted in applause, not for a politician's speech, but for justice delayed finally arriving. People crowded forward, wanting to touch Rose, to thank Caleb, to shake Dr. Brennan's hand. Jake fired his rifle once into the ceiling, silencing the chaos. "We're not done yet. We need to make sure this sticks. Need to get all this evidence to federal authorities. Need witnesses willing to testify in court." "I'll testify," Martha Jensen said immediately. "Me too," Daniel Cooper said. "All of us," said another widow. "Every family. We'll stand together." Caleb looked around at this community he'd left behind 5 years ago, this town he'd hidden from in grief and isolation. They weren't perfect people. They'd been scared, complicit through silence. But tonight they'd found their courage. Tonight they'd chosen justice. Rose moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his. Together they'd survived a blizzard, planned a reckoning, faced down a killer. Together they'd kept a promise to a dying man. "Pa," Caleb whispered, so quietly only Rose could hear. "I kept my word. Justice is coming." Outside, in the cold December night, Sheriff Coleman loaded Marcus Thornfield into a reinforced wagon. Federal marshals, summoned days ago by telegraph from Dr. Brennan's office, waited to escort the prisoner to Charleston. Marcus looked back at the community hall, at the light and noise spilling from its windows, at the town that had finally rejected him. "This won't hold," he said. "I'll be out in 6 months." "I don't think so," Coleman replied. "Federal charges, 17 counts of negligent homicide, attempted murder, fraud, bribery." He climbed onto the wagon seat. "You're going to prison, Marcus, for a very long time." As the wagon rolled away, carrying its cargo of justice delayed, Stone Creek began the hard work of healing, of learning to live without fear, of building something better on the ruins of Marcus Thornfield's empire. And in the community hall, Caleb Mackenzie and Rose Whitmore stood together, hands intertwined, survivors both. Partners in the truest sense. The mountain had brought them together through storm and struggle. Now they would build their future together through truth and trust. The reckoning was complete. The promise was kept. And tomorrow, they would begin again. 6 months had passed since the night Marcus Thornfield was led away in chains. 6 months since Stone Creek had chosen truth over fear, justice over complicity. Spring had come to the Blue Ridge Mountains, transforming the harsh white landscape into something green and alive with possibility. The trial had been held in Charleston, a federal proceeding that drew attention from newspapers as far as Philadelphia and Boston. Rose had testified, her voice steady as she recounted being left to die in the blizzard. Dr. Brennan had presented medical evidence and survivor testimony. Sarah Thornfield had brought her uncle's own documents, his own words, to damn him. And Caleb had stood before a judge and jury and spoken the promise he'd made to his dying father, a promise finally kept. The verdict came swift and unanimous, guilty on all counts. 17 counts of criminal negligence resulting in death, attempted murder, fraud, bribery. The judge, a stern man with gray whiskers and no tolerance for corruption, had sentenced Marcus to 25 years in the territorial prison. At 68 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. Justice, delayed but not denied. Now, on a warm May morning, Caleb stood on the site of the old mine. It had been sealed years ago, but today they were building something new here, something that would honor rather than exploit. A monument. 17 names were carved into a massive piece of native granite, hauled from the mountain itself. Thomas Mackenzie, Samuel Mackenzie, the names of all who'd died, each one rendered with care in letters deep enough to last centuries. Below the names, an inscription that Rose had written. They were miners, fathers, brothers, sons. They died not from the risks they accepted, but from the greed they trusted. May their memory call us always to choose lives over profit, truth over convenience, courage over fear. Martha Jensen stood beside the stone, hand pressed to her husband's name. Daniel Cooper and his family clustered nearby. All 17 families had gathered, along with half the town of Stone Creek. Even Red Sky Walker had made the journey down from his mountain sanctuary, standing quiet and watchful at the edge of the crowd. Reverend Hale stepped forward, Bible in hand. "We are gathered to remember," he began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, "to ensure that these men, these lives, are never forgotten." He spoke of each man individually, telling their stories. Thomas Mackenzie, third-generation miner who'd loved Shakespeare and taught his sons to read. Samuel Mackenzie, who'd carried poetry into darkness and dreamed of being a teacher. William Cooper, who'd worked extra shifts to feed 4 children and save for his daughter's wedding dress. Each name, each life, each loss made real and honored. When the Reverend finished, Martha Jensen stepped forward. She carried a simple wooden box, weathered by years. "My Thomas made this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It was to be a jewelry box for our daughter. He never finished it." She placed it at the base of the monument. "But it's beautiful anyway. Like his life. Cut short, but beautiful." One by one, family members came forward with tokens, a photograph, a tool, a letter, a child's drawing, objects that spoke of love and loss and lives that had mattered. Caleb and Rose stood together, watching. Caleb's throat was tight, eyes burning. This was what he'd fought for. Not vengeance, though that had been part of it, but this, recognition, memory, the public acknowledgement that these men had been worth more than the coal they'd dug, worth more than the profits they'd generated. "Your father would be proud," Rose said softly, her hand in his. "He'd be here with them," Caleb replied, laughing at my terrible speech if I'd been asked to give one. Rose smiled. The past 6 months had been transformative for her as well. She'd found her place in Stone Creek, working alongside Dr. Brennan in the medical practice. Her nursing knowledge, learned from her mother, had proven invaluable. She'd helped deliver babies, set broken bones, treated winter ailments. The community that had once viewed her as a scandalous mail-order bride now saw her as one of their own. And she and Caleb, slowly, carefully, had built something neither had expected to find. Not just partnership, but love. After the ceremony, people gathered at the community hall for a meal. Tables laden with food, the kind of abundance that came when an entire community contributed. Children ran between adults, playing games. Laughter mixed with tears. Grief and healing existed side by side, as they always must. Jake Whitmore found Caleb near the punch bowl. "Got something to show you," he said, jerking his head toward the door. Outside, the spring air was warm and sweet with the smell of blooming dogwood. Jake led Caleb to where several horses were tied. "That one," Jake said, pointing to a sturdy mountain-bred gelding. "He's yours." Caleb stared. "What?" "The town took up a collection. After everything you did, everything you lost. They wanted to give something back." Jake grinned. "Can't have the man who brought down Marcus Thornfield walking everywhere." Caleb ran his hand along the horse's neck, feeling the strong muscles beneath warm hide. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it. Say you'll stick around instead of disappearing back up that mountain." Jake's expression grew serious. "You've got people now, Bear, whether you want them or not." "I want them," Caleb said quietly. "Took me 5 years to learn it, but I want them." Inside, Rose was talking with Sarah Thornfield. The younger woman had stayed in Stone Creek, working now as a teacher in the school. Her uncle's assets, seized by the court, had been liquidated to provide restitution to the victims' families. Sarah had taken nothing, wanted nothing that came from Marcus's blood money. "Have you heard from him?" Rose asked carefully. "Once. A letter from prison." Sarah's mouth tightened. "He blamed me, said I was a traitor to family, that I'd destroyed him for nothing." "You destroyed him for 17 lives," Rose corrected gently. "For justice, that's not nothing." "I know, but it still hurts." Sarah looked around the hall at the families laughing and eating together. "Though this helps. Seeing them happy, seeing healing." Dr. Brennan joined them, carrying a plate piled high with food. "Eat," she commanded. "Both of you are too thin." They ate, and Dr. Brennan told them about her plans to expand the medical practice, maybe train Sarah as a nurse. The town was growing, changing. Marcus's mines had been permanently closed, deemed too dangerous to ever reopen. But new businesses were starting: a lumber mill, a tannery, a proper general store with goods shipped from Charleston. Stone Creek was learning to build its future on something other than the dangerous extraction of coal from unwilling earth. As the afternoon wore into evening, Caleb found himself standing outside again, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Rose found him there, as he'd known she would. They'd developed a sense of each other over these months, an awareness that felt like coming home. "Penny for your thoughts," Rose said. "Thinking about my father, wishing he could see this, see that his death wasn't meaningless." Caleb turned to face her. "Wishing he could meet you." Rose smiled. "I like to think he knows, somehow." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. Finally, Caleb said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous habit." He huffed a laugh. "The cabin, it's too small." Rose's eyebrows rose. "Too small for what?" "For 2 people. If 2 people were going to live there." Caleb's usual confidence had deserted him. He felt like a boy again, awkward and uncertain. "I could add on. Another room, maybe 2. Make it proper." "Proper for what, Caleb?" Rose asked, though her eyes sparkled with understanding. "For a wife. If someone were willing to marry a mountain man who talks to horses and lives miles from anywhere." He pulled something from his pocket, a ring, simple silver with a small stone. "It was my mother's. Not much, but it's honest. Like I'm trying to be." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Caleb Mackenzie, are you proposing?" "Badly, seems like." He took her hand. "I know I'm not what you dreamed of when you answered that advertisement. I've got no mansion, no wealth, just a cabin and some land and a stubborn streak a mile wide. But I can promise you honesty, loyalty, a life built on truth instead of lies." "And love?" Rose asked softly. "And love." Caleb's voice grew stronger. "More love than I knew I was capable of until you walked into my life half frozen and completely fearless." Rose laughed through her tears. "I was terrified. You were magnificent. You are magnificent." He went down on one knee, there on the grass outside the community hall, with the mountains watching and the sun setting and the sound of celebration drifting from inside. "Rose Whitmore, will you marry me?" "Yes," Rose said, pulling him up, pulling him close. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed, and Caleb felt something in his chest unclench, something that had been tight since the day his father died. Permission, maybe, to be happy again, to build instead of mourn, to live instead of just survive. Inside the hall, someone had noticed them through the window. A cheer went up. People spilled outside, surrounding them with congratulations and joy. Jake slapped Caleb on the back hard enough to bruise. Dr. Brennan embraced Rose, fierce and proud. Martha Jensen cried happy tears and offered to organize the wedding. The celebration that had been about remembrance transformed into celebration of new beginnings, of love found in unlikely places, of 2 people who'd survived a blizzard, fought a killer, and found each other in the process. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, under the same cottonwood tree where the monument dedication had been held. Rose wore a dress of simple cream linen, wildflowers woven into her dark hair. Caleb wore his best clothes, beard neatly trimmed, looking almost civilized except for the wildness that still lived in his eyes. The eyes of a man who'd walked with death and chosen life. Red Skywalker performed the ceremony, a blend of Cherokee tradition and frontier simplicity. He spoke of the mountain bringing them together, of how the strongest partnerships were forged in the hardest circumstances. "You walked through storm to find each other," the old man said, his black eyes moving between bride and groom. "Now walk through life the same way, together, honest, brave." They exchanged vows written in their own words. Rose promised to stand beside him in wilderness and civilization alike, to be his partner in all things. Caleb promised to protect, but never cage, to honor her strength and courage, to build a life worthy of her faith in him. When Red Sky pronounced them married, the cheer that went up could be heard all the way to the next valley. The celebration lasted until dawn, music and dancing and more food than a small army could eat. As the first light touched the eastern peaks, Caleb and Rose slipped away, riding double on the new gelding toward the cabin that was now their home. They'd spent the past 2 weeks expanding it, adding a proper bedroom and a small room that could serve as Rose's medical office for when weather prevented travel to town. Jake and Daniel Cooper had helped with the construction, along with half a dozen other men grateful for what Caleb had done. The cabin was still simple, still rough by Eastern standards, but it was sturdy and warm, built with care and meant to last. A home. Inside, Caleb had left a fire laid, ready to light. Rose moved to start it, but he stopped her. "Wait," he said. From a shelf he took down a book. Old, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age and stained with coal dust. This was Samuel's, the poetry book he died holding. Rose took it carefully, opened it to a random page. The words there spoke of love and loss and the endurance of the human spirit, perfect and heartbreaking. "I want to read from it sometimes," Caleb said, "to remember him, to keep his dream alive. He wanted to be a teacher, wanted to share words and ideas. Maybe we can do that for him." "We will," Rose promised. "We'll read to our children someday. Tell them about their Uncle Samuel, who loved poetry, and their grandfather Thomas, who kept his promises." Caleb pulled her close, this woman who'd become his partner, his wife, his future. "I love you, Rose Mackenzie. I love you, Caleb. You, my mountain man, my promise keeper." They stood together in the cabin that had once sheltered a desperate woman from a blizzard and now sheltered a family just beginning. Outside, spring continued its transformation of the mountains, turning death into life, winter into warmth. Years would pass. Children would come, 3 of them, strong and bright and taught from birth that courage mattered more than comfort, that truth was worth fighting for. Rose would become one of the territory's most respected medical practitioners, delivering babies and healing wounds throughout the mountain communities. Caleb would serve as a guide and protector, using his knowledge of the wilderness to help settlers navigate the harsh terrain safely. Jake Whitmore would marry Sarah Thornfield in a ceremony that surprised no one who'd watched them dance together at Caleb and Rose's wedding. Dr. Brennan would train a generation of nurses and midwives, ensuring her knowledge didn't die with her. Sheriff Coleman would serve honestly for the rest of his career, trying to atone for his years of complicity. And once a year, on the anniversary of the mine collapse, the entire community would gather at the monument. 17 names carved in stone, 17 lives that mattered, 17 reasons to choose justice over convenience, courage over fear. Marcus Thornfield would die in prison 8 years into his sentence, bitter and unrepentant to the end. His empire would crumble, his name become a cautionary tale. History would remember him only as a warning of what happens when greed overwhelms humanity. But Thomas Mackenzie, Samuel Mackenzie, and 15 other good men would be remembered differently. As fathers and brothers and neighbors, as men who deserved better and finally received justice, however delayed. And Rose and Caleb would tell their children the story. How a blizzard brought 2 lost people together, How a promise kept changed a community. How love could be found in the darkest circumstances if you were brave enough to open your door. On that first morning of their married life, none of that future was known. They simply stood together in their cabin, watching sunlight stream through the windows, listening to birdsong welcome the new day. "No regrets?" Caleb asked. Rose thought of the advertisement she'd answered, the journey west, the man who'd tried to kill her, thought of the blizzard and the desperate crawl through snow and the threshold she'd collapsed upon, thought of everything that had happened since. "Not one," she said. "You?" Caleb thought of his father's last words, the promise he'd carried for 5 years, the loneliness and grief and anger. Thought of the frozen woman on his doorstep and the decision to open the door despite every instinct toward self-preservation. "Not one," he echoed. They kissed as the sun rose fully over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting everything in gold and promise. Two people who'd lost everything and found each other. Two people who'd chosen courage and been rewarded with love. The mountain had tested them. The mountain had transformed them. And the mountain would keep their story. One more legend of survival and justice in a land built on both. This was their beginning. Their promise kept. Their life earned through storm and struggle and an unwavering commitment to truth. This was home. It was everything they'd fought for, everything they'd nearly died for, everything they'd built together through storm and courage and truth. And it was more than enough.